Anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me check the levels.
Okay.
Hello, this is Matt Hurd at Obsessive Viewer on Twitter. And then you go.
Sorry, I thought...
Okay. I was checking it, but I didn't prep say something.
I was miles away. This is Tiny at Obsessive Tiny on Letterboxd.
And this is ObsessiveViewer.com's The Obsessive Viewer Podcast. Hello, and welcome to The Obsessive Viewer. We're a movie and TV podcast that covers a specific topic, be it genre, trope, movie, or show, each episode. You can find more of our work at ObsessiveViewer.com and more of our podcasts at ObsessiveViewer.com/podcasts. You can also like us on Facebook and join the Facebook group at Facebook.com/TheObsessiveViewer. And finally, you can support us on Patreon at Patreon.com/ObsessiveViewer at the minimum rate of $1 per month for an exclusive RSS feed with content recorded specifically for Patreon supporters. I'm your host, the aforementioned Matt Hurt, one of your hosts, the aforementioned Matt Hurt, and I'm here, okay, yeah, this is an old notes, and I'm here today with the other aforementioned host, Mr. Tiny.
Hello.
Hi, Tiny, how's it going?
It's good, man. How are you?
Good, I'm doing well. Yeah, we are recording this the night of the second presidential debate that turned into two separate town halls at the same time. Yeah, so that's fun. Yeah, and this is an episode about Heartland.
Yep.
Let's get right into it. Oh God, I'm all over the place. Okay. Today on the podcast, we are going to be talking about some movies that we've seen at Heartland Film Festival this year. It's currently running as of this recording. I don't know if I'll have this out by the time... I'll probably have it out by the time the festival's still going on. So, given that 2020 is 2020, Heartland Film Festival is doing a virtual film festival, and they have individual virtual screenings for individual movies, and they're also doing drive-in screenings at Tibbs Drive-In here in Indianapolis. And yeah, I'm super excited for them because they've been, working hard to adjust to that, as a lot of other film festivals are or have been this year. So it's really, really impressive that the alterations that go into running something like that in this brave new world we're in. So hats off to the people at Heartland. And Tiny, you and I have watched some movies, and we're going to discuss those movies here on this episode.
Yep.
But first, I want to hit some news or some housekeeping that we are going to have to do here.
Okay.
So first up is Heartland is going on, and on the website at ObsessiveViewer.com, we are covering, we have reviewed a few movies from Heartland so far as of this recording. So I'll put links in the show notes. Ben has a couple of reviews up from Heartland, and I have a couple as well. So I'll put links to that in the show notes and everything. And also, our very own Michael White, of As Good As It Gets fame. He and his band, As Good As It Gets, have launched a Kickstarter, or not Kickstarter, Jesus, a Patreon, where they're going to have, they are having monthly, perks, like acoustic songs for Patreon supporters, like behind the scenes stuff. It's really cool. Check that out. I'll put a link in the show notes of this episode. It's patreon.com. I don't know what the URL is. It's on Patreon. I'll put a link in the show notes of this episode. So go and support Mike. Basically, this Patreon that they're doing is specifically so they can keep their music on the different streaming platforms for as long as they possibly can. That is the purpose of this Patreon. And it's really cool of Mike and Dustin to go into that world of paid content. And so yeah, check it out on Patreon. I'll put a link in the show notes. And then also, the other thing I wanted to bring up is that I wrote an essay about The Mist. Did you read that?
I haven't had a chance to read it yet.
Okay, cool. So, I wrote an essay about Frank Darabont's adaptation of The Mist. I wrote that for our friends over at Midwest Film Journal. What they do is every year they're kind of the thing that Midwest Film Journal does is they have series of essays from a wide swath of contributors that they have themed essays around. So they did like a Keanu Reeves retrospective called Keanu World Order. And Evan did a series of essays about Godzilla called Are You There, Godzilla? It's Me, Evan. And our very own Ben Sears is doing a series of essays about Happy Madison movies called Happy Valley.
Taking one for the team.
I know. And man, okay. So I'm so sorry, Ben. I swear I'm going to do this soon. But he enlisted me to do a special dual kind of conversational essay kind of thing about 50 First Dates. And I have dragged my feet watching 50 First Dates. And I'm going to watch it soon, and then we're going to collaborate on that and everything. But I tried to watch 50 First Dates a few days ago, and I swear to God, it is a chore to me to watch.
Oh, really?
Yeah, to watch really any Adam Sandler movies.
Mm-hmm.
And it's I don't know. I knew in 2014 when we did Summer of Sandler that I grew out of his shtick,
right,
and everything, and to go back, it's so hard for me to do that.
I feel like 50 First Dates has some charm to it, though.
Sure, yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm gonna do that soon, and then we're gonna collaborate on that.
Good luck.
Thank you.
May the odds be ever in your favor.
Oh, yes. May the be
very
odd. Jesus Christ. But anyway, so one of the yearly things that they do over at Midwest Film Journal is they do No Sleep October. So the month of October, they do a lot of essays about horror movies and everything. And I contributed an essay about Frank Darabont's adaptation of The Mist. And it's funny, I wrote it, and I messaged Evan, and I was like, okay, it's done, it's ready to go, I think. And he's like, if you want to sleep on it and finish it up and everything, go ahead. And I was like, yeah, I think I'll sleep on it and everything. And then I tweaked it a little bit, but. Anyway, it posted yesterday, and I'm actually really proud of it. I went back and reread it, and yeah, I'm really proud of it. So check that out. I'll put a link in the show notes as well. And check out our friends at Midwest Film Journal. They do a lot of really cool stuff. And,
awesome.
Yeah. And I think that's all the new business I have.
Okay.
Yeah, anything new with you in the realm of obsessive viewing?
No, not really.
Nice.
No.
Okay.
It's more of a potpourri thing.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if we'll do a potpourri section today.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'll very quickly recommend the Comey Rule on Showtime.
Oh, okay.
It aired a couple weeks ago. I think it was like a 2-night event thing, 2-episode thing. Jeff Daniels plays James Comey.
Oh, okay.
Director of the FBI for a while. And Brendan Gleeson plays Donald Trump.
Oh, I've heard that his performance is
very good.
Nice.
Very good. But yeah, it's a very really nice representation of the whole James Comey controversy, of which I didn't even follow very well, and
I honestly didn't either.
Yeah, there's been so much shit going on with this administration. It's hard to remember what all happened. There's so many characters at play, but it's a very good representation of that. It's based on James Comey's book, so it's actual personal accounts from him. There's some very glaring stuff in there, and it's you will particularly like it. I don't know if you have access to Showtime.
I don't.
Okay. But anyways, if you can find it somewhere, it's kind of long. I think it's about 3.5 hours total.
Okay.
Over two episodes. But it goes quickly because it's pretty compelling.
Okay.
It's really good. I liked it a lot.
Nice. Okay, cool. Yeah, I will check it out at some point somehow. Yeah. I was going to cut in when you said it's based on James Comey's book. And I was going to say like, oh yes, Comey dogs and chili fries.
Nice.
The Comey story or whatever.
I can't even remember what the book is called. But,
well, I just said it. It's Comey dogs.
Oh
but I wanted to say like Comey is where the heart is. No, that's not. Yeah. On that same note, not to get us onto a tangent or anything, but I listened to Woodward's latest book.
Oh,
Rage.
Sweet, really?
Yeah, really good.
Nice.
Well, really good, really terrifying, really infuriating, but like a really well done book.
Nice.
But I do want to mention that it's incredible to me, like the work of the narrator on Audible for that. I don't know his name offhand, but it's like there is a certain skill to speaking in Trump's words, because famously, Trump was interviewed like 17 times for this book. You wouldn't know that from the 300 and some comments on the Facebook post I had about that, because people were detracting from the fact that he knew about coronavirus to talk about the military stuff.
Right.
Because I had mentioned that in the Facebook post, which, anyway, yeah. So anyway, the narrator, it's just amazing because like Trump is not an eloquent speaker, like in general, like it's very
putting it lightly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. He's very fragmented and just stream of consciousness and everything. And what's amazing is like there are excerpts from the interviews that are verbatim from the interviews, and the narrator does a great job of intoning that stream of conscious kind of tone to it, but also presumably replicating or approximating the tone and cadences of it, so that you can really get a sense of like the intonation of what he's saying and everything. Because the interviews are all like it's recorded audio and everything, so. It's really cool to listen to the narrator just really not do a Trump impression, but do his due diligence to narrate the book or to incorporate the tone and everything and the context of tone to Trump's words.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That is a fine line where you're kind of like, you don't want to do an impression, but you want to get the tone and all that. Right?
Yeah.
That is totally a skill, like you said.
Yeah. And especially in this context with like a book, it's like, it's not like he's, doing an impression on SNL or anything.
Right.
It's like that is where the importance of it lies, in the performance of the narrator. So, so I recommend that. Yeah.
Cool.
It was funny because a friend of the show, Aaron in the UK, he commented on one of my Facebook posts and said like, oh, I just used one of my Audible credits to get Fear by Bob Woodward, which was Bob Woodward's first book about the Trump administration. And like, I like the comment. I meant to go back and be like, I'm sorry. like I don't make like, cause he's in the UK. I'm like,
right.
I feel like this isn't indicative of the entire country. I hope. Well,
they're stuck with Boris Johnson over there. He's not as bad as Trump, but he from what I hear, he's a little bit like Trump.
Yeah, I don't know enough about him, but like every time I see him, I just like I think like this. One of the best like comments I saw of someone, and it always stuck with me, was that every time they see Boris Johnson, he just like the way that he looks, and this is probably degrading to him and everything, but it's like the way that he looks, it looks like he's a child who made a wish to be big, and it came true.
That's oddly specific.
Yes. And I might try to find the picture.
That's great.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. The world is on fire.
Yeah.
so that's cool. The Comey Rule. I'll check that out.
Yep.
Have you gotten around to? I mean, it just aired like yesterday, but have you, or maybe tonight? I don't know. Anyway, the West Wing reunion?
No. I'm trying. So fucking HBO Max is not available on Roku or Amazon Fire.
I've heard that. Yeah.
I guess I'm gonna have to watch it on my phone.
Jesus. Well, you can download the app to PlayStation 4.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I have that in my, like, Paige wants to watch. She loves the West Wing. Yeah. That's down in my basement.
And she's not allowed in the basement.
Yeah. Yep, it's my den, my dojo.
Nice.
Man cave. I'm kidding. It's not. It's not.
It just reminds me of a bit on the Comedy Bang Bang show. They did a sketch where it was Scott Aukerman doing like home renovation things. It's like it's called like a teardown. And it's a parody of those home improvement shows and everything. And he has a couple that they're renovating the man's like quote unquote man cave. And it's just like, it's like not, I mean, it's just like it needs renovation and everything. And so there's a there's a recurring bit like 3 times. I know I've said this on the podcast and I'm sorry, but he says the phrase, he incorporates this phrase 3 or 4 times throughout the sketch. That's like 5 minutes at most. And he's like, yeah, this man cave is looking more like a man's grave. And it's like every time, like he says that and it gets so repetitive. And then like one of the segments, the wife is like, yeah, cause his man cave, and then Scott Aukerman pops up out of frame and like pops in the frame. He's like, it's like a man's grave. It's hilarious. I don't know. I'll put a link in the show notes to it. But anyway, yeah, so the Comey Rule, that's cool. And I'm excited to check out the West Wing thing as well.
Yeah, I want to see that.
Yeah. So Heartland.
Yeesh.
Let's get into it. So I think we're gonna talk about a couple of documentaries that we watched. Big news out of Heartland. Heartland Film Festival, first of all, is in its 29th year here in Indianapolis. It's grown a lot in those 29 years. It's one of my favorite things to do under the umbrella of Obsessive Viewer, is to cover Heartland and everything. Like some of my fondest memories of like the thing that we do here is going to Heartland and like doing the red carpets and the press junkets and everything. And it's, first of all, it's just heartbreaking that I can't do that this year the same way that I did in previous years. Because, and I've said this before on the podcast, that I kind of use Heartland as a way to push myself into more, into out of my comfort zone, into more of a, oh, this is a serious thing that we do kind of thing. And it's a bummer that, I can't do that the same way this year, but I'm really excited for them and proud of the show that they're putting on with the virtual film festival and the drive-in stuff. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. So Tiny, how do you feel about Heartland this year and everything?
As always, I'm just amazed at what they accumulate. Cause so much of it's virtual and you can actually see like the list of stuff that they have, just all in one spot. It's just awesome what they manage to compile every year. And this year's no different. But again, it is kind of, one of the fun things about it is, nobody ends up at Heartland by accident. You know what I'm saying? No one's like, hey, should we go see a movie tonight? Like that doesn't happen.
Right.
Like, everyone's there intentionally and it's true hardcore movie fans, and you always talk to somebody and get to know somebody. Yeah. And it's just a shame we can't do that this year.
Yeah. I love that. That and Indie Film Fest the same way. Like I remember the first time we did Indie Film Fest, I think it was the first time, like we went to like the after party after like the closing night or opening night movie. And like we were hanging out, we were talking to people and stuff, and I was like, oh, this is neat.
Right.
So, yeah.
It's social things.
Yeah. It's weird.
So yeah, I haven't watched a ton of stuff, but I did watch these few documentaries.
Nice.
So yeah.
Sweet. In And I just thought of doing I'm not going to do this joke because the content of the movie is too serious, but I mentioned big news out of Heartland. The first documentary we're going to talk about tonight is 76 Days.
Mm-hmm.
And so, big news out of Heartland. I've said this now 3 times. I think MTV Documentaries, or some distribution arm of MTV bought 76 Days, for distribution. So it is going to be available at some point in the future, because obviously with film festivals, the film festival circuit is about independent filmmakers getting their films seen and getting their films out there and getting word of mouth, big, the big ones like Cannes and Sundance and everything. That's where people sell their movies to distributors and everything. And Heartland isn't. Heartland is a growing entity in the film festival circuit, as I understand it, constantly growing, and it's really cool because 76 Days was sold at Heartland. They were able, the filmmakers sold their film at Heartland. I think one of the jurors, screening jurors or whatever for Heartland this year was someone from MTV, and they sold it through that. And I mean, it's a huge kind of milestone for Heartland, and I'm super excited for them and the filmmakers, because this documentary is just, it is incredible.
Yes.
So yeah. So let's talk about 76 Days. Do you want to? Okay. So the plot summary, or the description, is raw and intimate. This documentary captures the struggles of patients and frontline medical professionals battling the COVID-19 pandemic in Wuhan. And, directors are, and I'm so sorry, I'm going to likely butcher the pronunciations, but, I'm going to try my best. Wixie Chen, Ho Wu, and this was interesting. Anonymous. One of the directors is just the credited name is anonymous.
Yeah, I wonder what that's about.
Yeah, me too. I have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a very engaging, from my perspective, documentary. How did you feel about 76 Days, and what did you know about it before going into it? Actually,
I didn't know much about it other than what you had told me. I hadn't really heard of it or anything. I'm very curious what the context is. I wonder if these, and maybe you know this, I don't know, were they filming a different documentary about the medical system in China? How did these guys happen to be here with a documentary crew?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
But what I will assume is that the documentary begins, I don't remember the exact date, but January 23rd, I think, 2020, which is the day that Wuhan went into lockdown. The city of Wuhan went into lockdown because of COVID. And what I would assume, again, this is based on nothing, is that the filmmakers were aware of the growing concern surrounding COVID and everything, and likely decided to start the documentary, and that's just when they started it. Was when it went to lockdown.
Okay,
that's what I would assume. I don't know, but I did, to plug the website again, I did write a written review of it on obsessiveviewer.com. I'll put a link in the show notes. By the way, just really briefly, what I've been doing in the show notes of the episodes is each episode, I've been putting the links to the reviews that Ben and myself write in the interim between episodes of the podcast. So if you go into the show notes of the episodes, you'll see Matt's recent reviews, Ben's recent reviews, and you'll see a list of the links of basically the reviews that have been posted between the last episode of the podcast posting and the moment I press publish on the podcast that I'm talking into right now. Yeah. So anyway, check that out in the show notes of the episode. So, Yeah, so it's interesting because Tiny, today at work I was listening to our podcast, and there was, and I think in Patreon, it was in Patreon, one of the Patreon recordings recently, I talked about the documentary 9/11 from the pair of French filmmakers, and I think a firefighter who they were filming a documentary about firefighters in New York, and 9/11 happened, and they documented it in real time, filming it.
Okay.
And this documentary, 76 Days, evoked so many memories of that documentary. Because this entire thing, everything that we've gone through since the outbreak happened and the pandemic started and everything. I mean, like I've talked to Fecus about this. Like we're living through history right now.
Right.
And like this is a time that's going to be talked about in history books and is going to be discussed and everything. Like it's a milestone for lack of a better term, in the annals of world history, essentially.
Right.
And on that note, I did have the thought today that while I was listening to my own podcast, I did have the thought that like I kind of like that we have this outlet to document it in the way that we have.
Right.
But anyway, so this documentary, 76 Days, evoked those feelings of watching the 9/11 documentary, and this just was, in a word, it was just sobering and just really, really emotional for me. And the thing that I kind of kept coming back to was that we're recording this October 15th. It has been 7 months since the U.S. went into pandemic mode in early March of 2020. Which included locking down, quarantining, social distancing, mask wearing, just all of these precautions and everything that, for some reason, some people don't take seriously. But it has been a turbulent, year, and we're in an election year. We're a couple of weeks away from the presidential election of 2020, and the amount of information and misinformation and just scandal and like the amount of stuff that has just come out over the last 7 months, both COVID related and not COVID related, has been information overload, just draining in every sense of the term.
Yeah.
And to watch a documentary filmed in Wuhan, before the virus came to America, and to see the level, like to see what the virus itself did to the population, and to see what the medical health professionals in Wuhan had to do just to keep people alive and to care for their patients and everything. It's something that in the 7 months since we in the U.S. have been, living through a pandemic, it's so easy to lose perspective of what it's all about and what is going on and what this virus actually does to people and how it is, essentially. And that's why I say that watching this documentary is just a sobering, just emotional view of it. So,
yeah, sobering is such a good word, because it's gotten so lost in the politics.
Yes,
and we forget about the human cost and the emotional cost and all of the issues that have arisen from this, and boil it down to its bare essentials, and it's a virus that kills people, and we've sort of gotten away from that, and none of these doctors or patients were sitting there like, this is all a pandemic, or
right.
Does wearing a mask really do anything? They didn't have time, because people were dying. These doctors were sleeping in the hallways,
yes,
and didn't leave the hospital for days, probably weeks at a time. They're having food shipped in. They had to turn people away at the door. Like, it's just, it's torturous.
Yeah, like they literally they could not let patients leave or anything,
right?
And just it's heartbreaking, and again, it's sobering, and to see the level of precaution that the doctors and the medical staff had to go through. Like, there are shots of them duct taping the gloves to their gowns. What's the word I'm looking for?
Like a jumpsuit, basically.
Yeah, like a jumpsuit kind of thing, and like wearing the masks and face shields and like all of this precautions just to go into a room where patients with COVID are and treat them is just, it's really puts into perspective how much of an asshole you have to be to ignore that,
right? The
seriousness of it, and everything.
And because of all those things you just said, it also shines a light on how, like, the adjective that came to mind was how literally angelic medical workers are.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't know how they maintained any form of positivity, humanity, or empathy throughout this, because it's so, I mean, it's just disheartening on every level.
It really is.
They had no reason at all to be positive, and like in particular, that one of the patients they were dealing with, we find out partway through that the patient has dementia.
Yeah.
And is constantly bothering them, frankly. Like, he's leaving his room, which they're supposed to stay in the room for quarantine purposes, right. He's constantly leaving his room and walking around trying to get out. Sometimes he's very nice, sometimes he's belligerent, and he's confused all the time. He doesn't understand he's in a pandemic, right? And I understand the cameras maybe weren't around sometimes, but not one time was any of the medical staff like frustrated, or even before they knew that he had dementia, they were not frustrated or mean or short or terrible with this man. They just led him back to his room and put him in there, and they were, they spoke to him and in a friendly way. I mean, I was really amazed by that. I would have lost my patience.
Yeah. Patience.
A little wordplay for you. Yeah. Dark wordplay.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, angelic is the right word, and like, I'll talk briefly, probably after this review, about another documentary at Heartland, but it's another documentary about the healthcare profession and everything, which I'll talk about later. But just, it reminds me of when we reviewed the documentary about race car medical staffs.
What was that called?
Premium Rush.
Oh man, I can't remember what it was called.
Yeah. It was a really good documentary.
Yeah, it was great.
I'm still really proud of that review that we did.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Rapid response. Yeah. So one of the big things about rapid response was and I felt this way when I watched 76 Days, and I felt this way when I watched In Case of Emergency, which is the documentary I was alluding to earlier, is that I don't, for the life of me, I cannot fathom the strength and willpower it takes to do that type of work.
Me too.
Like, it's just something that I would never be wired for. And I mean that in the highest complimentary way to the people who do that. Like, I was so affected by this documentary and In Case of Emergency. I haven't done this yet, but like, I wanted to post on Facebook and just be like, hey, just watch these documentaries at Heartland this year. Just want to say, every one on my friends list who works in the medical field, and particularly like if anyone is like an emergency department nurse, or physician in that department, like, thank you. Like, you're a freaking superhero. And I also had a really trite, like, corny thing that I was going to be like, this year we don't have superhero movies, but we do have superheroes in hospitals. But yeah. But like, and as corny as that is, I kind of mean that kind of sincerely, because I don't understand how people can do that. Especially,
me too.
Yeah, especially during a pandemic. Like, the strength that you find in doing that work is it's out of this world. I almost said literally out of this world. But I have no evidence to back that up.
Well, space nurses.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Space Nurses coming to Netflix. Copyright obsessiveviewer.com. So this documentary was just incredible, and something that we haven't really touched on is the way that the documentary was filmed. It's completely fly on the wall, like Apollo 11 and 9/11. Now 76 Days is it's completely verite. It's like there's no talking heads or anything. It's just documenting the
no narrative structure,
and it really engages you and envelops you in this crisis and everything, and it's just really, really powerful.
And it's wild that despite that rawness and realness that they achieve so perfectly in the documentary, there are moments or vignettes that are it's almost an example of the truth being stranger than fiction, or this is only something that you would think you would see if it were staged, I guess.
Yeah.
But we know that it's not.
Are you saying if it was a pandemic?
What I mean is there's a scene where one of the medical professionals has a tub, and they're filled with personal belongings from the patients, most notably phones. And you can just see, like, there's, like, a lot of these people these phones represent people who are probably going to die.
Yes, or
have already died.
Yeah.
And they showed one of the screens of the phone, and there were like 37 missed calls.
Yeah.
And so, that just illustrates, like, they're so busy saving lives, they can't even, like, they're not even worried about informing the families of these people, because they can't. Like, you have to have priorities, and sorry, that's not a priority, but to us, the people on the other side of that's horrific.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely horrific. And that, like just that scene, it's like, it feels like a scene, but it's not a scene. Someone was capturing an actual event. Like, this actually happened. That's how fucked up this is.
Yeah.
But that's just how, that's the direness of the situation, and how unique it is.
Yeah.
That part blew me away.
Me too. And I think in that moment they say, like, hopefully we can, contact their relatives and everything when we can. And it's just like this uncertainty of it. It's like, obviously that's not a priority at that moment. And to be fair, I mean, that is a horrific circumstance to be in, but it makes sense, because what would be the use in contacting the relative of someone who's passed away when you literally have patients, like, piling in and like trying to get through the doors. And there's, like, if you contact the relative, like, they're not going to be able to come in. They're not going to be able to come in and claim the body or give an identification, or, like, they're not going to be able to do that. They're not going to be able to start their grieving process.
Right.
And I mentioned the people not necessarily breaking in the door or anything, but that scene early on where the doctors are letting in patients because they don't, like, it's overflowing and everything. Like, there's like a room or atrium that is off the hallway, and it's just filled with shoulder to shoulder with patients who are waiting to be seen. And they have to close the door on them, and they can only admit, a certain number at a certain time when certain availability presents itself. And it's just like, seeing that is just heartbreaking, and it is so difficult. And to your point, it feels like something that you would see in a scripted thing. Like, I hate to make this comparison because I don't mean to diminish or lower the importance of the subject matter of this, but it reminded me of a Romero zombie movie.
Yeah.
Like, there are scenes in his zombie movies that are exactly like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just hordes of infected people at a door, and people having to turn them away, and it's just it is just horrific. Just
right.
Yeah. Again, fifth or sixth time I've said this. It's sobering.
Yeah. Right.
Just really, really powerful filmmaking.
And I think one of the, to kind of get away from the healthcare side of it and the pandemic side of it, I think one of the interesting parts of it is anything that happens in China is politicized because they're a communist country, and they still very much so control information. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of people they have a lot of older people, like half the country is over the age of 60 or something like that. Jeez. Which by half the country, I mean 600 million people. Mm-hmm. And those people came up in a time where it was true Chinese communism. Mm-hmm. And so they still have that old way of thinking where it's, loyalty to the motherland kind of thing. And you don't question authority. If you fight back, they're going to shoot you and throw you in a ditch kind of thing. And, when they say we're going to have a quarantine in China, they mean you're going to have a quarantine, and they're going to have guys with guns on the corner making sure you stay in quarantine. And it was just, it was funny. Not funny, but it was interesting. There were parts where one of the guys' loyalty to the Communist Party was in question, and he got really defensive.
Yeah, the phone call with his nephew or son or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And a few of the patients were just so. I feel like because they were on camera, they were very positive. Mm-hmm. I can't verify that. You know what I'm saying? I'm not trying to get conspiratorial or anything, but it's like, I've seen other documentaries that take place in China, like One Child Nation.
Yeah.
And I feel like people are sort of putting on a face or putting on a show because there's a camera in front of them, and you don't speak ill of how things are being handled because they're being handled by the government, and you don't speak out against the government, that kind of thing. And I can't verify that. It could just be these people are trying to stay positive or whatever, but it's interesting that the backdrop of China being the ground zero for this. It's interesting. That's just an interesting context for this to be in. Yeah. Despite all that, the medical professionals kept talking about people's ID cards and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And, that's not really something that happens here. It's like, come on. Well, health insurance.
Right.
Your health insurance card, but like Canada or the UK, it's like, come on in, there's no legal stuff. They don't care what your status is, right?
Yeah.
But it's always important in a place like China. It's ever important, I guess.
China.
So much. But yeah, it's
Trump. Not China.
Right.
Sorry.
And another thing, Wuhan it's a city of 11 million people, right? That's New York. That's New York City, right?
Yeah.
Which is the biggest city in our country. Well, it's second, but still, that's New York City or L.A. And just imagine if New York or L.A. had been the ground zero for this pandemic, and it's not even close to the biggest city in China. Mm-hmm. And just trying to just imagine quarantining New York City. Oh, God. It's basically impossible. Which China did fail at quarantining, doing a true quarantine of Wuhan, but they were pretty successful. Now, who knows how they went about doing that? I'm not sure all the. There's speculation that they literally had to shoot people and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's all unverified. They control the information, like I said, but
I remember seeing videos in the early days of people being just pulled off the streets and put into vans and driven off and everything.
Right. Who knows how they achieved it? You know, we may never know the truth, but I think it's safe to assume there was some shady shit going on, and some of the deaths were from bullets, not COVID. You know,
right? It's funny because the statement I just said, I've seen videos of people being pulled into vans and driven off somewhere. That can also be attributed to America during the protests.
It's true.
So anyway,
yeah.
I'm so just thrilled that this documentary was sold and is going to have some kind of distribution.
That's a great thing.
Yeah, because it's one of those documentaries, and like we've gone through a run of reviews, particularly of documentaries, where I'm just like, this is a documentary that needs to be seen. Like, it's something that everyone should see, and I'm so glad that it's going to have that opportunity.
It's so definitive. Like, that's what's great about it. Like, we can sit here and bitch back and forth about how we want to approach this pandemic and how real it really is. Are all those deaths really attributed to, all this bullshit argument we're all going back and forth on social media and all that shit. Fuck all that and just have all those people sit down and watch this. And it's like, try to have that argument while you're watching this.
Right.
Try to find some kind of bullshit. Like, everything is just raw right there on the screen. There's no questioning. There's no controversy. Yeah. This is as real as it gets.
Yes. It is unpoliticized.
There's nobody trying to punch up COVID numbers in this documentary. There's no conspiracy here. They don't have time for it. Like, this is an emergency.
Exactly.
And that's I think that's going to be the legacy of this documentary. And, like you were saying, we're kind of living through history, and I think this is going to be a very poignant piece of it that people might be watching 50 years from now.
Oh, absolutely. And then they'll have this podcast to listen to.
Unless we're all dead in 50 years,
Well, yeah.
If we're still here, who knows?
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
Please vote. That's our review of 76 Days. Yeah. So before we get to the next review, I just want to give a shout out to the documentary In Case of Emergency, which is also screening at Heartland right now. Heartland, by the way, is running until October 18th. So hopefully I'll get this episode posted Friday. So you'll have a couple of days left of Heartland to go through. But In Case of Emergency, I wrote a review of that as well on the website. It is a documentary about emergency department nurses. And it is just amazing. What's incredible about it is that it was filmed in 2019, and it follows a group, or not a group, but several different nurses in the healthcare system, in the emergency department of hospitals, and I think it's mostly hospitals, yeah. And it is like, I mean, it goes across the country. Like, there's people in New England, Kentucky, in the Southwest. It's all like across the country, essentially. And what is amazing to me is that the majority of it was filmed in 2019. However, in light of the pandemic, the documentary is framed. There's a framing device of it where one of the nurses that they followed in 2019, they show her at the beginning and end of the documentary. They show her in 2020, and basically the documentary begins with her in 2020, sitting on her front porch, drinking a cup of coffee, and looking just exhausted. And like, it opens with her saying, like, this is what I do every morning when I'm about to go in. It's just, and it's like she's emotionally, like, you can tell she's just emotionally just exhausted. And she says, like, this is the moment where I take a moment and I think about how lucky I am and fortunate I am and everything. And I sit out here because I don't want my kids to see me, break down and cry.
Wow.
And everything. It's just like that is like the opening scene of the documentary. And then we go throughout the footage filmed in 2019, it's a conventional documentary. It just has talking heads of the nurses talking about what it's like to be in the emergency department of a hospital, and they show different like specialties and everything. Like they talk to one nurse who is who does like helicopter stuff. Like when they have to fly out to remote locations to, a lifeline, essentially. And it's just like, again, I don't understand how people who do that kind of work, I don't understand how they're wired to do that and take on that much just stress and that much responsibility to react so quickly and make life or death decisions in the moment. But anyway, so the documentary is incredible. And throughout, like, they touch on like the opioid crisis, and they talk about how emergency departments are the safety net of our society, and how like it does all of these things. And then the last 10 or 15 or 20 minutes of the documentary goes back to 2020, and it follows some of the nurses through like going through the pandemic. And it is a documentary that provides some much needed perspective on what's going on, because you get this juxtaposition of relative normalcy in 2019 as, the documentary crew is following them throughout 2019. And then you're just gobsmacked by how just different and how aggressive the pandemic and COVID stuff has hit these people that you followed in their relative normalcy in 2019. It's an incredible documentary. So that's In Case of Emergency. Check it out.
Nice.
Yeah. So the next review we're going to do is, by the way, did you get a chance to see In Case of Emergency?
I haven't watched that one.
Are you going to check it out?
Sounds like I should.
Yeah. It's really good.
Nice.
So the next review we're going to do from Heartland is another documentary called Belly of the Beast, and the description is: when an unlikely duo discovers a pattern of illegal sterilizations in women's prisons, they wage a near impossible battle against the Department of Corrections. This documentary was directed by Erica Cohn, and it is currently at Heartland Film Festival. So, Tiny, it's interesting that this documentary was at Heartland, and like recently there was a news report that kind of went a blink and you miss it kind of headline that there was a report that there were forced sterilizations in the border facilities and everything. I don't know if that was ever corroborated or investigated or anything, but just the timeliness of this documentary is something that kind of struck a chord with me when I watched it. Were you aware of anything like this in terms of the Department of Corrections and the corrections system, the prison industrial complex?
I hadn't heard anything about this. No, this was news to me. But if this subject interests you, which is a strange sentence given what we're talking about, but if you're interested in the ails of the correctional department of the United States, around the United States, our friends at We Are Libertarians podcast several years ago, I want to say 5 to 7 years ago, had a mother and father on the podcast, and they spoke about the experience their daughter went through. And she was truly a victim. Her boyfriend, I believe, was dealing drugs, and the cops, he got busted with tons of drugs in the apartment, and she kind of got caught up in it and was in jail serving like a 5-year sentence. And she had a medical condition, and basically the doctors kind of basically like drugged her to death.
Jeez.
It like to hear the mother and father tell the story, it's absolutely horrific what they did to her. Just gross negligence on a medical level. And so I sort of became aware of the problem of, medical treatment in the correctional facilities around the country when I heard that episode, and I encourage people to go check it out. I wish I could remember the name of the episode and everything, but if you go to the We Are Libertarians website and you search for it, I'm sure you could find it. It's definitely worth a listen. But yeah, it's I have a kind of strong opinions on correctional facilities and the nature of what we consider to be justice in the drug war and stuff like that. And it's one thing I always harp on is how so much of the humanity is removed from it. And the designation of these inmates as people just goes out the window. And it's criminal. And as a society, we do it, and as a department, they do it. And it's a cultural thing. And it's really a shame because we are the most incarcerated country in the world, and there's so many people who are part of that system or used to be a part of that system, and it still haunts them. And they're people. They're still people. Yeah. They're not just animals that we have to lock up. They're still people, and we have to treat them like it. And this documentary shows that why we need to do that, because these women were not treated like people. They were treated like animals. I think one of the most poignant lines is kind of the main woman that we follow. I don't recall her name, and IMDb is failing me right now because they don't have the people listed.
Right. I want to mention her first. They show footage from her. I guess I don't know if it was a deposition. Yeah. And just when she kind of breaks down, when she talks about the abuse that she suffered, it was just like I was locked in on that emotional wavelength. It was just really powerful, and really heartbreaking. Right,
and what they focused in on is They really stole that woman. She at some point uses the line that they stole her future. Yeah, she already had a couple children, but it's like she was young when she got out of prison. She could have had more kids, and she was a pretty intelligent, fairly well spoken, and very driven person. Yeah. And without that record, I think she would be very successful. I mean, she is successful now. She became a social worker, which is hard to do. That's hard work, and it's hard to you have to have a degree for it, and it's tough. And so, I mean, she's become successful despite all this horror she suffered. And I feel like without her record, she could have been running some company or something.
Absolutely.
She's really just an incredible person. And I think what she drove home for me, I think one of the most poignant parts of the documentary is that one of the tenets of womanhood is the ability to bear children. And when you rob that from a woman, it's you essentially rob a piece of her womanhood, and it can be absolutely ruinous. And these people were doing it willy-nilly, basically. I don't know how else to explain it. It was rampant in the Department of Corrections. I think they said in the span of a decade, it was 1,400 women or something like that.
Yeah, an insane amount.
And one of the most disturbing things is they had a process for how they perpetrated these crimes. They were telling them, oh, you have a cyst on your ovary, we need to go and take it out, or you have something, and they were presenting it as a minor procedure that wasn't going to affect their reproductive abilities at all. Meanwhile, they were going in and sterilizing them. Right. And that's
they'd said that if we find cancer in there, we will perform a hysterectomy, right, or anything. And one of the I think that the kind of main subject of the documentary was describing what was going on, and was the reports, there was no cancer found in there, and they still did it. And that is just despicable, and it is one of the worst things that you can do to another human being, short of killing them outright. Because like you had mentioned, she talked about how they stole her future, and it's not to say that okay, women are only here to bear children or anything. It's that their choice whether or not to, have more children or have children when they're out of prison is completely robbed of them, like biologically speaking. But also, I mean, I can't imagine it being. I mean, it's hard enough to not to. I don't know how. I'm not to say to justify it or anything like that, but like. There are obviously other options to, have children non-biologically. But I mean, if you like adoption, someone with a record,
right?
Unbelievably difficult,
or
if
impossible.
not impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just, it is so, just bleak and tragic.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about shit that the Nazis did.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, this is like what else do you need to say?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And it was borderline sanctioned activity by the California Department of Corrections.
Right. Yeah.
And the other disturbing thing is this is California alone. I think they maybe mentioned a few other states where they found cases of this happening.
So?
But there's 50 states out there and 50 departments of corrections. Right. Who knows if this was common practice around the country? I mean, who knows? Like I said, we take these people and we dehumanize them and we sort of push them to the fringes of society to where they don't matter anymore and their voices can't be heard. And if they could be heard, I think we would all be really disturbed to find out what they went through or how bad this particular problem is. Absolutely. And like to your point about, the way that the prison system works and the correctional the Department of Corrections works, like the idea, I don't know much about that side of the government or anything, but like the idea of like for-profit prisons is just incredibly insane to me and horrifying. That phrase should not exist. Exactly. Yeah. And like, your point about, people, like it's the idea on paper is that, prisoners are meant to, like, they're serving time for things that they did. And, the idea behind it is to reform them or to, that rehabilitate them or any of those words essentially. So that they can come out of prison and, live a new life essentially. And the idea that, that's just something that the world or the country doesn't really do in practice is just tragic and yeah. Right. Quick sidebar, to use a legal term. Felon voting rights. Where do you stand on that? They should again. That's another phrase that shouldn't exist. Right, if you're an American citizen and you pay taxes, you should be able to vote. Yeah, I agree completely. Yeah, I think that should be a federal mandate. Yeah, Yep. This is not related to Heartland, but on Amazon Prime, there's a documentary called All In: The Fight for Democracy. It's incredible. I wrote a review of it on obsessiveviewer.com. But it is about voter suppression and Stacey Abrams is like the central figure of it. She ran for governor of Georgia in 2018. Okay. And lost, and it was like, it was clear, like, voter interference and everything. Brian Kemp is the guy that beat her in the race. And, like, it just underhanded tactics and just, like it's an incredible documentary because it goes through every facet of voter, oh my God. Suppression. Yes. Yeah. Everything from the founding fathers, civil rights era, now, it's incredible. But one of the parts that it talks about is, felony convictions, taking away voting rights from citizens and everything. And it's something, and I'm guilty of
what we've talked about, that like I never really considered that. I never really thought about that as a form of voter suppression. And like, yeah, I mean, yeah, it's, you're right. If you're paying taxes, you should vote. You should be allowed to vote. You should be able to vote, and it should be the easiest thing you can do.
Yeah. That's why, yeah, I always say if voting really mattered, it wouldn't be so fucking hard to do it.
Exactly.
Yeah, which is sort of a very cynical thing to say, but
Right.
it's sort of a way to say that it should not be so fucking hard to vote.
Right.
It should be a national holiday. Mm-hmm. We have how voting age people who actually vote in this country? It's like 48%.
Yeah.
Or it may be even worse than that. I mean,
probably.
It's sad.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, between just outright apathy and voter suppression and everything. Like, also that documentary talks about voter roll purging and stuff, and all of these other things. But anyway, so yeah, Belly of the Beast, really effective documentary and everything.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, and to your point about the emotional and mental toll that it takes, just the prison system takes on inmates and people in the prison system. Today, this was a long time coming for me because this episode dropped in July, but the Kingcast, in July had an episode about the gunslinger with, their guest was Damian Eccles, who was one of the West Memphis Three, who spent almost 20 years on death row before walking free.
Wow.
Yeah, and that was an incredible interview they did, an incredible episode. 'Cause he talks about how he was in prison, and like one of the things that like the trial of the West Memphis Three was that part of the trial was like, oh well, they like Marilyn Manson and they read Stephen King, so clearly they're deranged and they murdered and everything. So one of the things he talked about in that episode, which I'll put a link in the show notes, was how first of all, the kind of whole thing about that is that he's read The Gunslinger like 33 times.
Jeez.
And like it was one of those things where he read the Dark Tower series in prison, and like he would get books when they came out and read them and everything. And
wow.
He read The Gunslinger over and over and over again. And he talked about how when he finished the series, it was so effective on him because these are like, that was his escape. Like that, he was not like reading throughout his prison sentence, was his escape from the world and everything, from prison. Like that was he was transported into other worlds. But my whole point is that he mentioned that a lot of the time he spent in prison was spent in solitary confinement. And
oh my God.
Yeah. And to your point about dehumanizing inmates and everything, he talked about how they, after they were out, I think, they his legal team and social workers and everything, like brought in, like neurologists and doctors and everything. Like one of the leading like doctors about, that studied concussions in football players.
Yeah.
And like they determined that his time spent in solitary confinement like had adverse effects on his brain chemistry. Like it was similar to suffering concussions and stuff.
Jesus.
Because of that. So yeah, so just the inhumanity of the prison system on inmates, dehumanizing of them is tragic.
I don't know how that does not violate the 8th Amendment to the Constitution.
Yeah.
Cruel and unusual punishment.
Right, yes.
Yeah. I don't get like that. Please someone explain that to me.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, me neither. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeez, yeah. So Belly of the Beast.
Yeah.
Really, really effective and thought-provoking documentary, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's our review of Belly of the Beast.
Yes.
I think we're gonna kind of wrap up. First, Tiny, do you want to talk about just briefly, like, any of the other things that you've seen from Heartland?
Gosh, what was that one called? When My Time Comes. That's right. Yeah, documentary. So that I was very interested in that one because that's another issue that I'm like very I don't want to say militant, but very adamant about, I guess,
Sure.
Is essentially the right to die.
Right to die. The description, is spurred on by the death of her husband, Peabody Award-winning NPR journalist Diane Rehm crosses the country to investigate the right to die movement in America. It's directed by Joe Fab. So sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So that caught my eye, and then I'm a huge NPR fan. I mean, that's the only way to put it. And I'm not really familiar with Diane Rehm at all, really, even though she does continue to work apparently for NPR into her 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah. But those two things caught my eye, and I just really wanted to explore that more. And this is pretty much an exclusively talking head interview or documentary. But that's not to its detriment at all. I enjoyed it because I think it's a subject that needs to be talked about. And it's something I believe very vehemently in, that people should have access to these drugs and this system to where they can choose when they want to die. I think that's part of what what basic human rights are about: the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And part of life is death, and you should have the right to explore or to choose when you want to die. I don't. This is an extreme opinion, and I'm sure a lot of people would disagree with me, but I don't think suicide should be illegal.
Right.
Honestly, I mean, I think it should be. It should be something that people talk about, and someone can. There should be the way someone walks into a hospital when they break their leg. Well, that's funny. The way someone goes to a hospital when they've been in an accident someone who is suicidal should be able to walk somewhere when they're suicidal and have conversations and be treated for it. And we don't really have that. And that's this sort of folds into that. This isn't necessarily the same thing as suicide. It's these people are essentially on death's door. It's a different thing, but I just think this is so obvious to me.
Right.
That people should have this right. And I think it's I'm not going to spoil the documentary, but there's some reasons explored why I think it's obvious, Yeah. Because you're giving people the choice to go that route if they want to. You're not forcing them to. No one's putting a gun to their head, literally. Yeah. It's about choice. It's about choice, which is what freedom is about. It's a synonym for freedom. I say that all the time. Choice and freedom are synonyms of one another. And so that's why I feel so adamantly about this. And this documentary explored that fairly well. It's a little dry sometimes.
Yeah.
But I think there's people in this documentary who are about to die, frankly.
Right.
And to hear their experience is pretty special, I think. And that's the good part of the documentary I really focused on.
Yeah. I agree. I watched it. I wasn't as keen on it as you were. But I think that was more just like the kind of dryness and everything. The subject matter I found interesting, and my views on it align with the views of the documentary closely, and your views as well. It was good. Yeah.
Nice.
All right. Well, I gave my recommendation of In Case of Emergency, and I think should that do it for this episode of The Obsessive Viewer?
I believe so.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us on this first of hopefully, knock on wood, 3 Heartland episodes.
Nice.
That we'll be pushing out in hopefully quick succession over the coming days. So
sweet.
Thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.
And now, here's a short clip from our Patreon exclusive RSS feed. To hear the full clip and more exclusive Patreon content, go to patreon.com/obsessiveviewer and become a patron at the minimum rate of $1 per month. Thank you and enjoy. But yeah.
I'm glad we went there.
Yeah, me too. I haven't posted this on Twitter or anything, but I was going to say that in the 5 years I've had pizza, 5 years in December, the amount of times that I've said that this quote-unquote exchange has happened in my apartment is astronomical. But, hey, pizza, you're so precious. But I don't want to be based on a novel pushed by Sapphire. God damn it. Have I never said that to you?
Probably. And I probably suppressed it.
Yeah. But I don't want to be based on a novel pushed by Sapphire.
God. Oh, boy.
Yeah. Hi, Patreon.
Oh, my God.
Jesus Christ.
The Obsessive Viewer podcast is edited and produced by Matt Hurt and presented by ObsessiveViewer.com. For a full archive of our episodes, go to ObsessiveViewer.com/OV archive. You can also like our Facebook page and join the OV Facebook group at Facebook.com/TheObsessiveViewer. And follow us on Twitter at ObsessiveViewer and at ObsessiveTiny. And follow our recurring co-hosts at I am Mike White, that's me, at R.A. Feckus, and at Burger_Lurker. If you enjoy the show, please take a couple minutes to leave us a rating and a quick review on Apple Podcasts. This is the easiest way to support what we do, and all it costs is a little bit of your time. If you'd like to donate to the podcast, you can make a PayPal donation at obsessiveviewer.com/donate. Or support us on Patreon for recurring donations and access to commentary tracks and B-roll audio recorded exclusively for patrons at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. Every donation goes toward paying the fees to keep the podcast running and is greatly appreciated. For official Obsessive Viewer merch, including shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more, visit our TeePublic store. You can find a link to the store in the show notes of this episode and at obsessiveviewer.com/donate. Or you can simply search for Obsessive Viewer at teepublic.com, T-E-E, public.com. For information about our annual live event showcasing short horror films from local filmmakers, check out shocktoberInIrvington.com. And for an archive of all our events, as well as news about potential future events, head over to obsessiveviewer.com/live. For more podcast content, you can find Anthology, Matt's solo podcast covering The Twilight Zone, and other classic and contemporary science fiction anthology TV shows at anthologypod.com and on Twitter at OVAnthologyPod. You can also find Tower Junkies, a podcast where Matt and Tiny share their love of all things Stephen King and his magnum opus, The Dark Tower series, at towerjunkiespod.com and at towerjunkiespod on Twitter. And finally, check out The Secular Perspective, Tiny's side project podcast, which tackles current events and life's big questions from the perspective of secular hosts Chad and Amanda at thesecularperspective.com. The theme music for The Obsessive Viewer comes courtesy of the band Loudlike from their EP Mistakes We Must Make. Additional bumper music is provided courtesy of As Good As It Gets, which can be found at facebook.com/asgoodasitgetsband. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Kitty!